David Naughton. David, come on out.
Hey, everybody, I guess I got to sing this. Yes, I do. Bad Moon Rising. All right, I'm done.
Well, I got to ask you before we get into the requisite American
Double
Werewolf.
panel, though. How about that? Double moderator?
Right.
When one moderator isn't enough, you get two.
You get
If
double.
one moderator falls, the other one gets up, picks up the microphone, and
fantastic.
continues the interview.
I'll have to mention that to Griffin. We're going to do a show next month together, and we'll be co-answering.
That'd be great.
Anyway,
I
interrupt.
No, not at all. This is great because I want to. Before we get to, I have a lot of questions about obviously American Werewolf, but it's 50 years since the Planet of the Apes television show, which marked, your early television career. I'd love to know if you,
Oh, please.
if you remember anything about shooting that episode. Obviously, your brother was one of the leads.
Yeah, I don't know if people remember the TV show version of Planet of the Apes. My brother is James Naughton, who was one of the astronauts. It was Roddy McDowell, of course, and Ron Harper and my brother Jim. And so I went out to California. I was a drama student at the time. I was studying over in England, but I went out to the West Coast to visit my brother, and I visited him down on the set. This was at Fox, where they had the show going, and they were going, you could be a chimp. Yeah, he's got brown eyes. So I was like, well, I passed that part of it. Then I went to, I was cast to play this small little part that's, a speaking role. I was quite nervous about it. The thing was, it was a Dick Smith makeup. Dick Smith went on to teach Rick Baker, which was obviously years later. And I surprised Rick by going, I did a Dick Smith makeup, So that was it. It was just a short stint, 3 hours in the makeup chair to be made up in this, basically an ape mask. And they were saying, don't do anything that Roddy McDowell does. You kind of go, well, what's left? I mean, Roddy was so experienced. And so, I just remember the hard part, the difficulty was I had these huge ape shoes that was part of the costume. So, and this director was not a particularly, super nice guy. So I had to go in, basically make this entrance and have these shoes on, and they said, you got to hit your mark, which is, the mark is basically for focus, for camera, so they know, they try to keep you in focus. So it was important that you hit that mark. And of course, I had these shoes, so I really would be like here, and the shoes would be right at the edge of the stage, and so there was a little bit of discrepancy on, are you on your mark? I go, well, should I be here or should I be here? They go, your toes. I go, my toes or so I was pretty inexperienced, but that was about the extent of it.
Well, that had to be culture shock. Here you come from studying at a prestigious acting school in London. You're doing Shakespeare, and now you're doing
You got monkey
prosthetics,
shoes.
and you're playing.
Now I got
doing
monkey shoes.
business.
Well, that's the thing, I had this plan, and I should say to every actor, and I think every actor would probably agree with me, that you may have a plan, but that's not necessarily how it's going to go. How your career is going to go, if you even get one. But so, going to drama school was something that I was interested in when I was an undergrad. I went to Penn, University of Pennsylvania, and I had this idea about studying acting. My brother had studied and gone to drama school. So that's sort of the thing to do. And as I said, little did I know. So I went to this drama school in London for 2 years. It was a 3-year program, but I had been to college. I was a couple of years older than the other students at Lambda, London Academy of Music and Dramatic Art. They not big on music, but they certainly were big on the classics, and it's where I got my first real experience in the role of a Shakespeare play. And when I finished that, I returned to New York, where I started, basically looking for, roles as an actor, and I had no idea how it was going to go. And as it turned out, Joseph Papp, who had started the New York Shakespeare Festival, and it was running. They would do Shakespeare in the Park, Central Park, and then this particular year, they were doing a production of Hamlet with Sam Waterston as Hamlet. Sam Waterston, you remember from Law and Order, and casting downtown. So I went in and auditioned, and that's really where I got my first kind of professional role to be in the ensemble of a production of Hamlet. And this was the uncut, unabridged 4-hour version that we did in Lincoln Center. And it's where I learned to play poker, because there'd be a green room where you have a box and you're listening to the play and you're waiting for any cues. And I had so many different costume changes that, I have to just tell you the story because it's one of my most embarrassing moments, of course. So we're in this production of Hamlet, and I'm one of the pallbearers in the scene where Ophelia is brought in and Hamlet's on stage speaking, and we would enter up from the bottom. It was called the vom. You come from the front, but it's below the audience, and you come up on stage. So I'm in there winning like my first 7-card stud hand in the green room when the door flies open and this guy goes, "Naughton!" I go, "What?" And I hear that it's Hamlet saying, "Who is this that comes?" Well, nobody's coming because I'm one of the pallbearers and not dressed properly. I've got on these, sort of, pants and boots and a T-shirt. And I have no time to go back and put on this black cloak that I'm supposed to wear as a pallbearer. So I go tearing down to the vom where Ophelia's lying on this stretcher, and the 3 other guys are there and they're black. And Ophelia opens her eyes and she looks at me and goes, "You're in trouble." Yeah. So, Sam's up there like waiting for us to get on. So I pick up I'm in the front and we're going up. And so I'm, going up in my white T-shirt on stage in this production. And the stage manager was in the back of the house. So he wouldn't see us on stage. He's in the back of the house and he sees, why is he not in a costume? Why? This explains why these guys are late. So I was mortified. And afterwards, after the show, the stage manager, comes to my dressing room and goes, "This better be good," And the guys in the green room were going, "Don't mention you were playing poker or they'll stop, they'll ban it, they'll forbid us from playing." And there's these long scenes. So you have long time you could play for quite a long time if you, keep your ear on the box for what's happening on stage. So I told him that, I had to go to the bathroom and da-da-da. And, it was sorry. He says, "Well, you have to go and apologize to Sam for holding up the entrance of Ophelia." So I had to go down the hall, knock on Sam's door. And, we do 4 shows on the weekend, Friday, 2 Saturday, 2 Sunday. So you can imagine a 4-hour play where Sam was pretty beat, I have to say. He was on stage the entire show. And I knocked on his door and said, I wanted to apologize. He's looked at me like, "Are you in the show?" "Yeah, I was one of the pallbearers and I just was late and I'm sorry." He goes, "I don't even remember." He said, "No, don't worry about it." So I go, "Phew, that was that." But thereafter, my ear was glued to this squawk box, and that was that.
Yeah, but how much money did you win?
Well, of course, they go, he folded, which means, I'd lost that hand. And it was
Well, that's the unkindest cut.
a nice big pot of, upwards of $30. Come on. Who knows exactly what was in that pot, but I didn't get to see it.
Now these influencers get discovered on YouTube and they get a talk show out of it or a movie role. But, the equivalent of sort of going viral back in the day was your Dr. Pepper commercials.
Yeah, that was a thing. So, from this production of Hamlet, which was a limited run, then you find out, I go, "Hey, how hard is it in New York?" I just came to New York and got a job right away, got to join the Actors Equity, which is the theater union. And then I found out when it's over, what it's like to be an unemployed actor in New York. So I was able to get a commercial agent, which was really important. This is, we're talking in the 70s, how important it was to have an agent. So they'd send you out for different commercials. So I had gotten, this audition. They said, "This is 3 spots for Dr. Pepper. Do you know what that is?" I go, "Yeah, I'm familiar with Dr. Pepper." They go, "It's a musical. There's a lot of dance." I went, "Dance? Oh, I'm not really a dancer, but, I'll go to the audition." That would be the thing, you get out of work. I was working in a restaurant like most actors and went to this audition, and there were, hundreds of guys. We were supposed to show up in jeans and a shirt and be able to dance or move. And they gave you a number. I don't know if anybody was familiar with the show A Chorus Line, but that's sort of how it works, where you get a number on your chest so they could keep track of, oh, number 96, let's bring him back. And so that's how I started with them, and in a series of auditions and then callbacks. And then finally, a couple of weeks later, I was there with just 4 guys, and I went, wow, this is getting down to. And I remember the producer, a woman was going like this to me, and I was like, hi, And I was picked primarily not because I was a particularly strong dancer. The star of the commercial was the drink, and the agency was in New York, Young and Rubicam, which was a big advertising agency, and they had to get approval through the Dr. Pepper company, saying, this is the guy we're picking for these spots. What do you think? And he went, oh, okay. And so off I went to do these 3 commercials, and I'll just finish with this thing. I mean, this relationship with them lasted 4 years is really what happened. I had 4 one-year contracts with the company. But this first year, we did sort of introduce the Be a Pepper idea, was the whole notion of this campaign. And it was a 22-day shoot, if you can imagine. Films are made in, I've been in films that took, 22 days to shoot. This was 3 commercials, a 60 and 2 30-second commercials, 22-day shoot, primarily because there was so much travel. We started in New York, we finished in San Francisco, and we went to other well-known spots like the St. Louis Arch and New Orleans in the French Quarter, and would shoot for days and cast as we'd go, and did these commercials, which were successful for them and certainly for me.
So after all this time, are you still a Pepper?
Well, once a Pepper, as they say. And I mean, that used to be my one. What a pickup line. I go, you want to be a Pepper? What? What kind of a line is that? But it was really a pretty fascinating experience. One was we'd get to locations, and then we'd block out what it is we were going to do, and they'd cast always overqualified dancers to be backing up me, and I'd be just dancing to camera, and there'd be 15 seconds of the location that we're going to use in the commercial. It'll only be about 15 seconds of the track used, but we would be there all day, and I would do 90 to 130 takes of this dance to playback. And I just didn't realize that, that was sort of uncommon. Normally things get done in, maybe 10 or 20, but 120, and the director that I used, and we used subsequently for a number of years, 3 of the 4 years, he was like a painter. He'd see stuff, then he'd add something over in this background. So we'd add more. So you're doing takes, and he's looking through the lens, but he's not yet even completed the picture of what he wants to shoot, and that's how we would add it. And I was like the same, because I would be allowed to go to the dailies and see what we did the day before and say, there's not much different from what I did from take 2 to take 82, but there would be different things going on in the background. So I learned that, and also I got into the casting aspect of it, whereas, I went into the audition process, and now by the second year, I was in the room watching people audition, and they weren't exactly asking my opinion, but it would fascinate me, like how anybody gets hired, how does anybody get cast? Because particularly in commercials, there's a committee hire, it wasn't like a director who I later would meet, like John Landis, he'd make all the decisions. In the commercial world, and particularly in these dance auditions, there'd be 5 or 6 people with their 2 cents trying, well, I liked her, or no, he was really good, and so you just wondered, as I did then, how anybody ever gets hired. Or, you could be the best qualified and not get the job. It just it's just very subjective, how anybody gets cast.
Well, you mentioned John Landis, and for any of you aspiring writers or producers out there, it's sort of very inspiring that John wrote American Werewolf in London in 1968. As we all know, it came out in 1981. It was many years before he actually got to make it. Can you talk about how your journey began? I assume it wasn't an offer situation. You went in and auditioned.
Oh no, yeah. In fact, I've always been one of those guys that said, I'll meet and I'll read. I just don't understand. There'll be young actors who say offer only is the way that they want to get the job these days. It's like offer only. If they're not familiar with your work, you'll only, you want an offer and that's it. So yeah, with John, he had written this script when he was a production assistant on Kelly's Heroes. I don't know if you remember the film that was shot in Europe. So he was working and, got this notion of undead and what's this sort of idea of werewolves. And so he had this script and he was casting, and I was fortunate enough to be represented by some people that knew John or got in, because I don't believe that he was using a casting director. And got a chance to have a meeting with him. So I went over to Universal. It was nerve-wracking. It was when you get a drive on, that means you get to drive your car on the lot and park where the executives and all the people park. And there's a parking space, reserved for guests. I go into this office. I go, I'm here to see Mr. Landis. And I didn't really know what he looked like. There's this guy my age, in jeans, going, "Hey, what's up?" It's like, you're because he was coming off of the Blues Brothers, huge hit for Universal, Animal House, another big successful film, Kentucky Fried Movie, which I wasn't too familiar with, but that was one that he did, a zany comedy.
It's great.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. So we had a chance to sit down and talk, and he'd asked me, had I been to England. I said I just, returned from drama school a couple years ago, and so he gave me the script. He said, "Well, here's my script. I want you to read it." And then he writes his office number on the script. He says, "Call me tomorrow." And I said, "Oh, okay." So I did. Called him the next day. He goes, "Well, what'd you think?" I go, "Well, it's, you're really literally reading like David transform into a werewolf. Turn the page. Scene 6. So there's not a lot of detail in terms of the transformation. It's basically just reads like a story. These two guys are backpacking, and the movie that you've seen is the script that he wrote, and we shot just exactly that way. There wasn't a lot of improv. And I called him the next day. I said, "Wow, it's really cool." He says, "Well, do you want to be a werewolf?" And that was sort of it. The reason being he was so quick to make these decisions was Rick Baker was waiting for the cast of these two characters, both David, the part I played, and Jack, played by Griffin Dunn, to get in with him and start the preliminary makeup, which Rick had already, was dreaming up. How do you do this? How is it going to be done? Between the two of them, they were collaborating. It's going to be done, in bright light. I want to see a full transformation, a four-legged creature. And so Rick was busy with his trainees. These are young guys who later became pretty accomplished makeup artists to do the makeup. So I had to go. I got cast and went over to Rick's. It was basically a rented space, because subsequently he owned this gigantic building in Glendale, California, had like 50 artists working for him. But when I knew him, when I met him, it was rented space. You go in, there's all this stuff all over the place, like a carpenter shop, and it's, bits and pieces, body parts, molds that they were sort of trying to experiment with until they got the actual people. And so I went in like, "Hey, what am I doing?" And they go, "Well, we're going to start." So I started with these molds of my legs and arms, which, initially you go, "Hey, how hard is that?" You'd stick your arm in this vat of quick-drying cement, basically, and let it dry, and then pull your arm out. Now there's a hollow arm print, and that's how they would begin to make these molds, which were, nothing I'd ever experienced before, or anybody, really. This was new stuff. And they said, "Okay, now we're going to get to your head. That'll be tomorrow." I go, "My head?" "Yeah, we got to do molds of your head and face." "Oh, have you done it before?" They go, "Yeah, once." Oh, okay. And who was that? It was like, "Sean." He was this guy. "Yeah, I had to do it." Like, "How was it?" He goes, "It's not fun." I go, "Oh, okay, we're going to find out about how."
So talk a little bit about the process of applying that makeup. I mean, David transforms into a werewolf is kind of the Atlanta Burns of horror. The simple reality of that film is you're not just doing, from you to a full makeup job. You are doing interstitial pieces of the makeup. So was that process, you take 3 hours to put on these appliances and then, you put on more and you shoot again? I mean, what were those days like for you?
Well, it turns out that preliminary stuff took a few days to do for them to go and do the molds. I didn't see them again until we were in England. And Rick brought all his stuff and pieces and arms and legs and heads and the Nazi demons and brought all that in suitcases, as tourists. They didn't have work permits, he and his boys. So they just sort of came into England, oh, hi, and got in, came over to the Twickenham studios, which is where the studios that we were using. We shot the entire movie and just had my transformation, which is sort of like the payoff. It's what won Rick the first Oscar. The first Academy Award for special makeup was created in 1981, and Rick was the first recipient. And I think it was his transformation, even though, Griffin's makeup is pretty spectacular as he continues to decay and decompose right before your eyes. But it was his transformation scene, which we didn't shoot until everything was done. We did the entire movie and just had that left. And that was 10 hours a day, if you can imagine. 10 hours a day for 5 days of that transformation scene. And it started, early, 5 a.m. call. I was the only one on the call sheet, and Rick and a couple of assistants, and they'd start, right from the beginning, right? The first thing was the arm. Now, they had made a full arm mold. I remember doing the arm mold. Well, now they had an actual replica of my arm, but this thing was full of, of wires or, air, what do you call it? Little, not hoses, but similar, and it stretched, and it didn't just deform. I mean, it was a hand that actually went, lengthwise, and that was the first day. And, it's, as I said, that wasn't a 10-hour makeup because I was basically, it was just me and my arm. And, my arm was behind, and, they would bring this arm up in frame, and I'd look at it, and we do it. And John says, great, we got it. And Rick would go, no, wait. This took me, 3 months to make. He says, what else does it do? Was John's question. What else does the arm do? It stretches. We've shot it. We've shot it from a couple of different angles. I don't need any more. Let's go. And Rick says, but sorry, Rick. And so the next day, would be the next stage of it, which would be hair, yak hair from a yak, strands of it, sprayed with glue, laid on. Rick was very meticulous about all this. Air pieces of appliance, basically. It's rubber and latex was the essence of this. But his artwork and his, he was an artist, and he would paint this stuff so it would really blend in. Of course, the first thing that he would start on would be my hands, so I'd lose the use of my hands for the day, going, that's no fun. I'd have my thumbs would work, but that would be it. And then they'd go up my arms with all this yak hair and chest for the next sequence. And the question was, certainly in performance, after a full day of sitting in a makeup chair, was, how is this? Am I conscious? Am I unconscious? Am I, he says, no, you're very conscious. You're awake. Does it hurt? Yeah, this is painful. This is bone stretching. And so it was sort of a combination of the pain of this thing happening and just the complete shock and consternation of what is happening in front. This is what they said would happen, and now it's happening. So there were a few things, obviously, to play there. And again, we would do limited takes. John would say, I think we got it. Rick would protest. No, come on. This took all day. He says, what else does it do? What else can I do? Then I was in the floor for one whole afternoon where, we're on a set, so the floor moves, so they have a hole in the floor that I'm climbing in. So I'm up to here, and the appliance, this giant, wolf body is laid out in front of me. It's pretty primitive. It's 1981. The feet were worked with these sort of little poles that were connected to the ankles that he was operating from underneath the floor, like, ooh, ooh, ooh. And I'm going, oh, Lord, geez. It was not exactly high tech. But, the case in point here, this is practical makeup. And the question was, and Rick's, big concern was, how does it look on film? Because we're not hiding it. It's not in shadows. You're going to see it. That's the whole thing is, we want the audience to watch and witness this transformation right before your eyes.
Yeah, it's not a Lon Chaney step dissolve.
No.
What's extraordinary is that scene was not only groundbreaking then, it's still groundbreaking
Yeah, it kind of
today.
still works, People, it set the bar really high, obviously, for practical makeup and made, a lot of people, I've met people over the years who have said, I wanted to be a makeup artist after that, I don't know if there are any in the room today. Or, filmmakers, or introduced them to the genre of horror, saying, this was like the first movie my dad took me to. I was 8. I hear that a lot. I go, oh, great. Is your dad here? I'd like to talk to him. Because this was rated R, back in the day of ratings. I go, yeah, well, my mom brought me to it. Or, my grandmother was a big, I go, your grandmother? So a lot of people saw this movie way too young, freaked them out, but they came back to it. And that's one of the things about this movie that seems to hold up is the makeup is pretty special, and it's, as a show, it sort of holds together. And it's in London, which is also, just one of the best cities in the world, in my opinion. And, those landmarks are still there. So I still get and meet, and I've been to England a couple of times for shows. I come over and I basically say, I'm here because I was in your movie. I mean, they all take, ownership of, it's American Werewolf in London. It's our film. Okay. And it's, and they have online, if you go over there, you can go to all the different little locations that we used. Some people say, hey, here we are out in Wales. Wales was where the buildings are that, where we put a pub sign up saying the Slaughtered Lamb, and Griffin and I are walking up to it. That was just at somebody's farm, where we used, and the street signs out in the middle of nowhere where it says, which way is which, and so people have gone out there to see that. It's like 2 hours out of London. And the Moors was, really Windsor Park, part of the royal family's backyard. We had permission to shoot because you don't see any street lights or houses around. So we were able to shoot in a 360-degree, area. So we use that as well. But then, there are pubs and the hospitals, and the interior of the pubs are all still there. So everything's still there. So it almost keeps the film somewhat current in the sense that you can still go to London and see this stuff.
I'm not going. I
Stay off the moors.
Yeah. No, but
You don't need
I'm
to, but
still terrorized. But what's so great about the movie is there are very few movies that are able to walk the line between true horror and comedy. Usually it falls off that tightrope, but it's so grounded. And I think the heart of that is in your relationship with Griffin, and the fact that it's so great to hear that you guys are going to be doing this.
we'll do a show, yeah.
Show.
I finally got Griffin. We had done one years ago, and I go, Griffin, come on, these are great. We'll be where they say, from the cast of, and we'll do it together, and photo ops together. Anyway, he's on board now. And one of the things about this movie is in terms of, that catching lightning in a bottle idea was everything worked. The relationships worked. It was, we were fun to work together and try to come up with stuff when we were out on the moors talking and trying to, crack each other up. And John is a very funny guy, a high energy director who is always putting you on. As an actor, you have to be pretty thick-skinned for starts, and also just be aware that whatever you think you're going to do in this take or the other actors are going to do, he may have said something to them to change so that when you, on this take, they're going to say something differently. And it's not supposed to completely throw you, but he was always one of those, I want the real reaction. And, some actors don't like that. They say, this is a collaboration. We're supposed to all be on the same page. We have to know what you're doing and what I'm doing, and you'll see what I'm doing, and I know what you want. That's how you all work together to make the film. John would be sort of a real observer going, okay, now in this take. So there were a couple of times, when Jenny and I would be walking, and I remember we get in the cab and we find out, oh, I'm the werewolf. Oh my God, I'm the guy. There were all these, killings, and we're walking together down the street, and he would give me some things to do. He says, just go over and grab her or tickle her and see. I go, well, Jenny's probably not going to like that. He says, well, I want to see where you go over and you grab her and you're really active. And I go, okay, so there'd be a take with that. And she'd be like, what are you doing? Not saying that, but playing that. And he'd go, that's what I want. So that's how it's like to work with him. But as I said, it's real interesting. It's fast. You do a couple takes and it'll be done. There were things like we're in the zoo. we're at the Regent's Park Zoo, and we have permission to shoot there in the morning before they open. And this is the scene where, I wake up in the zoo with the wolves. Oh, hey, this is going to be fun. And that was one of these. This is going to be one take, okay? I mean, how are these wolves? They go, well, they've been fed. Oh, hey, safety first. So they have these wolves that are off this leash, and they're just sort of put into this cage, and they go, okay, get in. You go, okay, get naked and get in. You go, okay, this is going to be one take. I said, now how do I get out of here? She says, you go up over the wall, just to try to go up and over. I go, try to get up and go over, and this is going to be one take, fellas, because this is one of those scenes where, how do you get up and climb over? And it was one take. Wake up, there they are, and one started to come toward me, like, and I was just looking at him like, don't, just don't. And the thing is, you can't really read. A wolf looks at you, and it just is a blank stare. They don't put their ears back. At least these ones did not. They don't wag their tail. A dog will give you some sort of an idea of what mood they're in, and how curious they are of you. These wolves are just sort of looking at me, and I couldn't get out of there fast enough. They were saying, just no fast movements, no loud noise. I went, in the script, I get out of here fast. So, and there's not like, you think in the circus where there's always a guy there with a gun. Nobody had any guns. It's like, what happens if these wolves go crazy? Like, well, they've been fed. So that was it. Take one, boom. And then, the scene, I grabbed the coat from these people and run and grab it and run, take off, and I'm running back. And I just remember in that scene where I'm supposed to run, grab this coat, and take off, I look over and I see all these people, and I go, why do we have extras over there? They go, oh, those aren't extras. The zoo's open. I go, come on, what happened? We went past our time. So the people are coming in now for the zoo, and we're shooting over here. They shouldn't bother us. Don't pay any attention to them. I go, okay. I'm naked, by the way. So, and then there's that scene where I come out from behind the bush, and there's a lady there, and I go, oh, excuse me. Well, she was an extra, an elderly British woman who they said, look, this guy is going to come out from behind the bush. So you walk up here and stop right here. They gave her a mark, and I'm going to come out from behind without meeting her and without, no rehearsal. And he's just going to come out and see you and then go behind, and you just stand there. And she goes, oh, all right. Little does she know that I'm going to come out from behind this bush naked, and she's looking at me, and I just remember her going, oh, my God, I won't look anywhere but up. And saying, and my line was, excuse me, I think, and I duck out of there. But those are the kind of things where John, once again, getting a real reaction of a person, not filling them in on everything that's going to happen.
And no matter how many times I see that movie, I still laugh at Frank Oz, who is just delightful.
Yeah, I mean, they were shooting in town, and he just, I wanted to engage with him more just because, it's Miss Piggy, hey. But he was all business, He arrived as an actor, got his things done, and was gone, which is, unfortunate, but that's kind of what happens. I have to tell you, like, the first day of shooting was John Landis and the crew, this English crew, British all-English guys, shooting the porn stuff that's in the porn theater. So, they had a casting call for these actors to, play these parts, and they cast. So day one, the crew was going to quit because they go, "What's this movie about?" And they're going, "No, don't leave. This thing is going to be playing in the movie theater while we're shooting, in the theater itself." But that was the first day of shooting, was the porn stuff, and I mean, you hear it, and it's hilarious dialogue that John wrote. Makes no sense. And it's just another opportunity for him to, just be on the lighter side. But his theory, John's, was this is a horror film. Don't think this is a, Kentucky Fried Movie comedy or any kind of, Blues Brothers. This is, and so the marketing aspect of it was, from the director of Animal House, a different kind of animal. And he wanted people to be sure that they understood that this is a horror film, folks. It's going to get pretty raunchy. And once we get attacked, things turn pretty dark.
We have time for 1 or 2 questions, and while they line up at the mic, I got to ask you, back in the day, before there were Netflix streaming and direct-to-video, there were made-for-TV movies. And in 1982, you did an ABC Monday night movie, I Desire, which I don't know how many people remember it. I, for some reason, remember it.
I think I do.
I remember.
Yeah, I Desire. Brad Dourif is in it. Yeah. It was, I don't know what to say about it other than, there was a female vampire, and we were shooting in Hollywood, and it was pretty raunchy. We had night shoots. I just never was a big fan of night shoots. Midnight Madness, another little movie I did for Disney. A night shoots, you're working all night, every night, and then you try to turn around and have some kind of life on the weekend, only to have to go back to work on Monday at like 6 p.m. call,
The interesting thing was John Llewellyn Moxie, who did Night Stalker, did I Desire. It
Oh,
like
yes.
ABC's version of...
Oh, no kidding, yeah. But yeah, it was just one of those things where I was playing like a student. I always either play the student or the grad student. Then I later became the doctor or I go, okay, well, these guys are semi-educated. I want to play a big goon, Anyway, question.
Go ahead.
Hi, I'm Jess. Question is, I think everyone who's seen American Werewolf knows it's a special movie. But what do you think accounts for its lasting popularity 43 years on?
Well, I think certainly the makeup, for people that have never seen, the transformation is sort of like a marquee piece. And Rick Baker's work, as I said, he won the first Academy Award for it. And it's a pretty good story. I mean, it's sort of a romance. Jenny and I got along. She was a very professional actress, and we always had a lot of laughs on that show because it was Griffin and John and I and Jenny, So she, as I said, she was very fun. So I think that's it. Really the fact that it's a pretty darn good story, and the makeup is, was second to none. Thank you.
In the movie American Werewolf, what was the most awkward prop you had to put on?
The most awkward prop.
Or uncomfortable?
Well, the whole transformation, was one of those things. I had shot the whole film, and I thought, ta-da, we're at the end. We said, well, not really, We're at the bottom of the mountain. Now you got to climb this mountain of Rick Baker's makeup, and being followed around by a photographer who wanted to catch all the ins and outs. So that just the process of makeup was difficult, Even in the scene, I'm out in a hospital bed in a dream sequence, and I open it up. It's a big scare in the theater, and I've got this makeup on. I was wearing these scleral lenses. They're glass. They go in with a suction cup. They wanted to have this, an optometrist put these glass eyes in, but he wasn't available, So you got the prop guys going, all right, we're going to try this now, Dave. You're going, no, all right, hold on, guys, hold on. Wait. So that would probably be the lenses as they think about it, because they're not comfortable. They were painted like wolf yellow, and you can't see out of them. And they're supposed to be in for very brief time. Well, on a movie set, nothing's brief, Right. I was 2 hours later, I'm going, can we get these things out of my eyes, please? In a minute, So I would say probably the glass lenses. But yeah, thank you.
Go ahead.
Hi. I can hear you. You can speak up.
What's your most favorite part in the movie?
My most favorite part, probably getting with Jenny, Come on, we're talking 40 years ago, fellas. Did you understand what I?
It will.
Someday.
One day. Yeah, it was probably, our relationship with the nurse was kind of a special occasion. And that's all the time I've got, Roger.
Thank you. Last question.
Yeah, you mentioned that some of the lines in American Werewolf in London were ad-libbed. Do you remember a couple of them?
Yeah, well, it was pretty much as written, except out on the, all leading up to the attack. When Griffin and I are working together, and we're talking about our girls or while we're out hiking. There's a few ad libs, but pretty much John was, responsible for everything we said. I mean, then when we leave the pub, I remember ad-libbing. I go, "Whoa, it's a cold and a wet out here." He goes, "Oh, that's good. I'm going to keep that." But it's hard to improvise with John Landis because he's thought of it all. He's quite adept.
Well, I was thinking specifically about those sheep shit on my pack.
Yeah,
Was that actually
that's
in-
probably a Griffin line. I'd have to ask Griffin. But yeah, that was one of the first days of shooting, and Griffin tells the story. I'll just be brief. Where we had these little not motorhomes, like little trailers. What do they call them? Caravans in England. These are the little tiny dressing rooms on the location. So Griffin goes in to use his, and they decide they're in the shot, so the guys get in and move them. Well, they drive off with Griffin in the back, And so we're ready to shoot and go, "Where's Griffin?" We're out in that very remote location. It's wide open. You can't hide anywhere. You look around, where did Griffin go? We got a radio. "Griffin's in the caravan. We're bringing him back to set." So we get back, and then we get back in the truck, and then we get driven out. And that was all the first day of shooting. So we were all very nervous, and how's this going to go? And,
Thank you.
Well, before we say a big thank you to Griffin, as is tradition here at Nightmare Weekend, they take a group selfie. So if you could all huddle around the stage, I think they're going to take a picture, David, with you behind you.
yeah, my
Thank you so
pleasure.
much.
Thanks for coming out.